Let's bring in KT McFarland. She's former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor and American Conservative Union board member. To answer, KT, to answer Pete's question, I think, were someone here who thinks that analysis is incorrect, that Pete just laid out, they would say, well, the Trump administration drugged their feet. They've been asked about these documents, and they drugged their feet, and that's why it eventually ended in a raid. But help me make sense of that argument, while at the same time, the FBI was supposedly there a month ago, and took away documents. So in other words, they had access, took away presumably what they thought they needed to, and then yet, or 2 months ago, and then 30 days later, execute a raid.
It's just all baloney. I mean, this is yet another attempt by the Washington swamp, which is that combination of the bureaucrats, 97% of whom vote Democrat, the media, the Democrat media, and the Democrat establishment in the White House and in government. I mean, it's all the same group. It's the swamp, and they're trying yet again to take another jump at Donald Trump. First, it was the Russia hoax. Well, there was nothing to that. Then it was impeachment number 1. Well, that didn't work out. Impeachment number 2. Now January 6th. And none of these things are finding Trump guilty of anything. And so I think this was the last desperate attempt. And the reason it's baloney is really for 3 reasons. Number 1, the President of the United States has the authority to declassify any document at any time during his presidency. Trump took those documents. He left the White House before his term was done, before inauguration. So therefore, any documents he's taken, he could declassify at the time. Now, if they're going to argue, well, he didn't fill out that right form. He should have filled out that form and signed it before January 20th. Really? You're going to do this over he didn't fill out the right form? And then the second part of it is, when I worked for President Trump, I was in the Oval Office with him every morning for those security briefings. He didn't read the stuff. In fact, the criticism in the media was that Donald Trump doesn't read the highly classified president's daily brief every day. No, he had it orally briefed to him. He didn't read the stuff. He didn't take it with him. So why do they think suddenly there are these documents relating to national security in his safe? And then finally, so I was really curious about this, guys. And I went back, because it all sounded very familiar, these articles of the last couple of days. So I went back and looked at the Russia investigation. Here's what I found. It was the same reporters in the Washington Post and the New York Times. Same byline, same opening sentences, according to anonymous sources familiar with the case, but who are not authorized to speak on the record, blah, 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 blah. Trump did this, Trump did that. These guys were so lazy, they didn't even bother to write new articles. They just took the old ones from 4 years ago, cut and pasted, and then put a new thing in. It is the same thing as the Russia hoax, and I think it'll be the same result. There's nothing there.
Yeah, it does sound like an act of desperation, as you described. And you're right, it's deja vu. And, we don't have to go back, as you did, to those headlines to see it. All just feels very familiar. And I think people aren't going to fall for it anymore, KT. Here's Bill Maher talking about just that and how this may actually backfire and have the opposite effect of what the deep state and the establishment wanted to see happen.
He is the luckiest man in the world. His fortune was finally falling. DeSantis was beating him in the polls. You know who hates this more than anybody? DeSantis.
Yeah.
DeSantis, look, I had this in the bag, and now I got to run against President Martyr. And this is saving Trump politically. Because now, of course, all the Republicans, what do?
So, KT, DeSantis wasn't beating Trump in the polls. He's so overwhelmingly ahead of DeSantis, even still, amongst the base of the Republican Party. But it's true. Did Merrick Garland just seal a nomination for Donald Trump as people look around and say, if they could do it to him, they could do it to us?
The thing about the Democrats and the permanent establishment, whether it's James Comey or Merrick Garland or all these guys, they're actually not that smart, because they don't sort of think ahead of the consequences of their actions. Whether it's the withdrawal from Afghanistan, whether it's the war on fossil fuels, they don't sort of see what the next step is. I don't think they foresaw the next step. And it's right, Donald Trump. I mean, I've not talked to him about this. I'm close to him. I stay close to him. I talk to him. I have not talked to him since the raid. But I know that I think although he's made implications, I'm going to run in 24, I don't think he really made up his mind. What this is going to do is this is going to make up his mind, because the one thing he doesn't stand for is if somebody punches him, he punches them back. So I think what they've inadvertently done is, A, create a popular martyr, and B, rallied Republicans of all persuasions who may not even like Donald Trump to vote for Donald Trump, and I think they've motivated Donald Trump to run again.
You know, KT, I want to return to something you said that I think is fascinating and is worth highlighting. You know, it was a bipartisan consensus that the president does have the ultimate authority to declassify any document. You can go back to 2017, and law professors, legal and analysts on both sides had echoed that point. And you made the point, well, if there's some technicality about the form or whatever. The thing about that is, I want to make this clear. There's no one that approves declassification. It's not like he fills out a form and turns that over to some other authority. He is the authority. The president is the authority on what is declassified. So the form argument really doesn't even hold any water either.
Yeah, I mean, even the formal argument and the fact that Donald Trump could take these documents with him. The question I would ask, are there duplicate documents in the National Archives? I mean, when I left government, you turn over everything to the National Archives. And you certainly turn over all classified information. But do we really think Donald Trump, who's not a guy who's great on details, do we really think that he was sort of going through the file cabinet and putting files in some cardboard box and in the middle of the night sneaking them out of the White House? That just doesn't make any sense. Use your common sense. So, you know, when a president declassifies documents, I mean, I was in there with President Reagan when he declassified documents to talk about the invasion of Grenada and that we were going to send troops there. It's a simple form where the president says, I declassify the following documents. And so if they're going to claim that President Trump somehow didn't write that little note to say I declassify those documents, that doesn't even hold up in a rule of law, in a rule of court, and it certainly doesn't hold up in the court of public opinion.
All right.
For sure. Well, KT McFarland, you know what you're talking about. You've been there, you've seen it. Great analysis this morning. We appreciate it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.